Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and Hell Let Loose's Update 7 is formally here. I know you guys have probably been waiting to hear my verdict on this update, and what's actually next for Hell Let Loose, which tends to be a pretty common question I get. Update 7 for me changed and manipulated a lot of the core aspects of Hell Let Loose that were pretty lacking, mostly in terms of animations and certainly in terms of sound effects. And I think it's safe to say it's been a hell of a hit, and the Carrington map especially, I feel is a super good improvement to the game. Now, it wasn't without its faults. There have been some crashes and FPS issues, but the FPS issues for the most part have already been resolved. I went from getting 50 to 70 FPS on Carrington to between 80 and 100 FPS on Carrington, which is quite impressive. If you are struggling with that game, I recommend perhaps turning down your draw distance or viewing distance from epic to high or high to medium, just for the sake of that individual map. That can also massively and drastically improve performance. And the crashes are here and there, but we are having a string of hotfixes which the developers have been working on, and nothing fills me with more confidence surrounding a game than issues being presented and then automatically stomped, or communication regarding those issues within less than 24 hours. I think it's super impressive, and I think the Hell Let Loose development team deserve a real pat on the back and perhaps a little 1 week break after this, because they've done a super good job at really just getting out ahead of all of these issues and pushing it forward. So what is my verdict? Well, the animation system is probably the big highlight for me. Being able to hop over fences is much more fluid. Being able to just manipulate your character model so much better and smoothly, and transition between different styles of stances and all that kind of good stuff that you'd expect to be relatively smooth is so much better. I think some people didn't appreciate just how good the new animations looked until the frame rate pick was done, just because obviously with the frame rate dips happening and with all of the bugs surrounding that, I don't think people realized how fluid these new animations were, and they really are fluid. That's the best way to describe them. Being able to transition between different stances, being able to hop fences more easily, and being able to see just so many people sprinting, crouch running and stuff with animations that are procedurally generated and don't require, you know, these fixed animations that look super janky is just so much better. It's such a superior system, and I almost can't imagine playing Update 6 in comparison to Update 7. My only minor complaint, and this is a very, very small complaint, it's not a huge deal, is that sometimes when you strafe with your character left and right, that animation looks a little bit too static. It kind of almost breaks away from the fluid mold we've seen, but it's nothing detrimental at all, and nothing that you actually even really see that often. But overall, I've got to say, super impressed. You know, there's something really cool about, you know, seeing somebody with their third-person animation overhaul, firing their rifle over a wall, seeing the recoil kick back, seeing your teammates just move so fluidly, and also not getting stuck on fences and stuff, you know. I think the big issue with games in early access is sometimes there never is one big problem, but rather loads of small ones, and the inability to vault over objects and just the clunkiness of animations was certainly something plaguing Hell Let Loose that is now completely taken care of, and I'm really proud to say that that's the case, and I think it's really excelled the game into a much better territory. Moving on to the sound effects. Sound effects are something in this game that of course were lacking as well, and I think it's a little bit hit and miss here. You know, some of the sound effects seem to have worked really well, like hearing that MG42 put some terror in you. That's a beefy sounding weapon. You know, it is the creme de la steak, so to speak, of World War II, and it sounds exactly like that in Hell Let Loose. Some of the other guns, a little bit weird. You know, the STG-44 perhaps isn't as impactful as I anticipated it would be. Some of the single-shot rifles, like the Gewehr 41 and perhaps I don't even know if there is a 43 variant, I never really look. Some of those are a little bit on the I don't know, just sort of the muffled kind of side of things, but some of them do a really great job, like the M1 Grand or Garand, however the hell you lot want to say it. I think they've done a great job with that weapon. I think some of the snipers sound really, really clinical as well, like the Springfield, the punch on that is real good. Same with the Kar 98, that now sounds incredibly punchy. So a little bit hit and miss, you know. I still think there's some room for improvement in that department. The BAR is another weapon that screams to me that it just doesn't sound like it has a big enough of a punch, especially considering the weapon. But ultimately, I'm happy with the SFX overhaul. I think the soundscaping is quite impressive as well. You know, hearing the guns change audibly dependent on the environment they're in is quite cool. The one thing I would say is directional audio is still a little bit off. You know, the SFX is much better, but the directional side of things, sometimes I don't think it's inherently clear whether something's in front of you or behind you, and you only really get that when you start moving left and right to sort of gauge it in your left and right sort of hearing levels. It's quite difficult, but I think directional audio is something that's always needed a bit of an improvement. I was kind of hoping there'd be a little bit more of that with the soundscaping in this update, but that's definitely on the agenda still. But ultimately, the SFX overhaul, you know, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. You know, it's nothing incredibly perfect. There's still a few weapons that perhaps could need a little bit more tuning, but on the whole, I think it made the game feel more real, and it makes the sound of the game much more compelling in my opinion. But I haven't even mentioned the shining star of this update, and that has to be Carrington. Carrington is an incredible map. It's one of the best in the game in my opinion, and when you want true urban warfare with detailed interiors and exteriors and, you know, street to street combat, you know, this is exactly what you're getting in this. Now that the FPS hotfix has been applied and I'm getting between 80 and 100 FPS, I can really enjoy this map for what it is and what it offers in terms of gameplay. And I'm really impressed with it as well. You know, they've got this great transition between some more open spaces into dense urban environments, and the mapping team should be really proud of themselves. There's also some really quirky bits as well, like, you know, the ability to hop between some barges to get across the different island breakups between the rivers. You know, it really does just, it breathes intensity into the game. And the urban environment of Carrington is one of the most impressive I think they've introduced, and probably, in my opinion, one of the best parts of this update. So on the whole, I'm really impressed. But what is next for Hell Let Loose, now that Update 7's out of the way? Well, I think we're going to see an emphasis entirely here on some optimization passes. I think it's becoming inherently clear that people really love the game and they love what it's about. But if it could run better on some lower end systems, a lot more people would love the game more vividly. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Optimization is a little bit hit and miss on some maps more than others. You know, I would like to get more consistent frames in some places. Sometimes when a lot's going on the screen, it feels like they just completely crumble. So that's definitely something I feel that should be happening. But the final major improvement I feel is that there's actually going to be a lot more time on the developers' hands here. The SFX and animations ultimately were a very large overhaul of the game that likely consumed a lot of hours at that office, and this now gives the development team more freedom and time to take up either lots of different smaller projects like optimization or just new content or something of that variety, but it also gives them time to undergo even larger stuff, like, you know, we are aware that the Eastern Front is coming to this game at some point, and perhaps that's now on the agenda. We also know that transport vehicles are something that are in the fray as well, so, you know, lots of things here really that now have the time to be addressed or the time to be focused on, and I think, you know, there will be a little bit of a plateau period after Update 7, you know, especially considering how hard some of the people have worked on this, but I wouldn't be surprised to see an optimization pass update within the next month or two. I think that would be probably on the main agenda, I feel, for the vast majority of players. So folks, that's it for my video on Update 7. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Feel free to leave a like and a sub if you do, and consider becoming a member for as little as $1.99 a month in order to access some cool perks, like being in the credits for all videos. Have a good weekend, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.